Unformed bodies can be extracted, intact, and grown in incubators. That is what SFK Syndicate does. They aren't listed as an actual company. Instead, SFK is privately owned and invests a variety of organic, medical, and packaging companies, as well as politics. I will be silenced because my story is true. You are not allowed to know the truth. Be careful, dear reader, because the truth is offensive to the hissing censors, squinting at my words and finding them to be controversial. I thought I swear not one word of this is open for debate. There's no argument here, just the deadly facts. My investigation began when I found out the cold hard truth about American legislator. All those grinding politicians telling us about body rights believe only in money SFK pays them. This is not my opinion. This is a fact. I will demonstrate as well as the horrors that led me to. Nothing but fear was in my hands. I had no proof. I knew too much and I could not prove any of it. I needed to accumulate terrifying facts, solve a fatal riddle. Despite my fears, against the terror, I went forth. I worked for the FAC for 18 years. I spent a lot of time connecting money to political causes and confirming the legitimacy of politicians' views and who backed them financially. And that's how I found enough discrepancies between chosen politicians and their money to dig deep. I no longer work for the FEC. The syndicate had enough power to have me fired. Read no further. I cannot protect you from the dangerous information. Perhaps someone set a fire to this work, and I will be removed. I cannot fear for you, and you will never know the truth that is out there. In interest of survival, after learning how dangerous the syndicate was, I wrote this as a fictionalized version of what actually happened. The story is true. After I lost my job, I went home and found my house burning down. I trembled in mortal dread. I was to become hunted and persecuted. I would be defamed, discredited, and destroyed. I was watching death, my home burning, and a reaper dancing in the flames. I realized it was the first step in getting rid of me. Homeless and unemployed, I would be an easy target for assassination. I wouldn't even be missed. All my money was withdrawn and put in cash in the seats of my car. I had to survive long enough to find a way to tell everyone what I had learned. I also needed help publishing my story. Newspapers and magazines would not accept my writing. I eventually sent my notes to ghostwriter. It is likely that by the time you read this, I will be hunted down and silenced permanently. I was always paranoid, looking over my shoulder, noticing each glance and greeting as a potential threat. I could not rest until I had enough proof of what I had learned. I knew that the SFK syndicate existed, had traced their money to the variety of politicians that were merely smiling flesh puppets. I was their primary prey, and I was afraid. At the organic food markets, wandering around, I noted the various metabolizer mixtures. I'd found that money invested in them was sponsored by SFK. It is not too different from providing cattle with certain grains and grasses to ensure the quality of meat. I shivered, afraid to connect the dots. My skill at forming big pictures from small details was working against me. And my mind betrayed me and jumped to conclusions that I did not want to acknowledge. I had a number of places to go. I just wanted to take a random survey of the food products. They were the only very small part of my investigation, but I was having trouble solving the big picture. It was, at the time, just too big for me. At the wastewater treatment facility, I found some public records of chemical compositions from samples. I was able to write down all the details I needed to ask about. Then I got a phone call appointment with the university professor of the biochemistry and asked what the findings indicated.
Are you talking about pork hormones?
The professor asked, sounding intrigued. These were from the wastewater samples. They have to provide the composition to be licensed to produce Tagro.
Those results don't make any sense. Maybe it indicates contamination from a meat packaging facility. Some kind of pollution.
The professor sounded like they were saying such words for their own ease. I felt the chill creeping into me. I went around from city to city wherever Tagro was being produced, and the results of chemical analysts was available without restrictions. Everywhere I went, the results were the same. I had asked, "Did you know that these results are routine?" I found them everywhere. The sanitation administrator I questioned didn't see any problem, not until I mentioned, "These are not naturally occurring in the human body or anything we eat. Don't you find that to be strange?"
Not really. There's all kinds of preservatives and crap in the waste. These isotopes are a match for those found in organic food.
I then just frowned, and then decided to leave. I went to the grocery store the next, and discovered more foods I knew to be modified by the SFK. Chemicals there were obsequential, could be found caked on the bowls of public restrooms. I didn't have to visit any more wastewater treatment facilities. I had had my answer. I was afraid, very afraid. I felt that they could find me at any moment, follow me, and remove me. I had already learned too much. They knew all about me. The pocket politicians financed by the SFK were invariably chosen. Alone. That fact meant nothing. What had originally bothered me was that most of them only became active defenders of the law in opposition to surveys and restrictions after they were given money to do so. That was also not the strange fact, but it was sort of anomaly that they warranted my investigations by the FEC. It is the purpose of the FEC to investigate any kind of money that is buying power. They had bought a lot of power, and they own the government and the media. It would be a miracle, for example, if this story even saw the light of day, even as a fictionalized retelling. I doubt the possibility of anyone ever reading this. I must try anyway. I forfeited my life to learn the truth. I don't know why they bothered. It is illegal in the true laws of the land to even suggest there might be something wrong with choosing. Freedom of speech only applies to those who don't say the wrong words. But this is truth. The big money loomed like an awful monolith. I knew where I was going. A dark tower, a gateway to hell. I was terrified of my next move. I would be exposed, and they would not tolerate any increased knowledge. They already knew that I knew too much. I was always a fan of Mission Impossible. I think that Tom Cruise is a hunk. I had to get into Triad Med R&D. With their security, and with the SFK looking for me, it seemed like it could not be done. In the movies, they always try to overly elaborate entries. Sometimes, when entering an enemy fortress, broad daylight, without guys, is actually the only good option. It occurred to me that most of the security was focused on keeping people from breaking in or entering areas without proper clearance. I was sweating, despite the removal of my coat. I was shaking with the nervous anticipation. I could not steady my breathing. I hadn't even gotten out of the car. After throwing up and taking a motion sickness pill, I talked myself in with the peculiar words. I'm already good as dead. I have nothing to lose. I walked like a drunk up to the entrance. I had no badge to buzz in with, so I hit the comm and said, I have an appointment. They let me into the lobby, and there I was stopped by a security guard. After I was searched for any kind of cameras, recording equipment, or phone, I was allowed to speak to the receptionist.
Who is it that you have an appointment with?
I had shown my FEC identification. I gulped, terrified. I had no plan. I was just making it up as I went along. I don't know. I called ahead and they said I could interview Dr. Smalls about some funding issues at 9. I glanced at the clock. My eye was rolling around as I lied.
Just a moment.
The reception looked scrupulous and checked the appointment log kept handy on the desk calendar. I know that the security guard was busy talking on the radio. The receptionist's badge was on a singer just on the counter. I snatched it up and stuffed it in my pocket. My heart was beating 1,000,000 miles per hour.
Did you mean Dr. Semhall? That appointment isn't until 10. Would you like me to let them know you are already here?
I couldn't believe my luck. I nodded, and while the receptionist made the call, I replaced the badge. I was spotted placing it, and I said, "You dropped it." Access was given to me. I went to the meeting hall and showed my FEC identification.
I didn't know you were with the FEC. I thought this was about SFK.
The researcher looked at me oddly. I hesitated at the mention of Syndicate. Who would know about them and mention them? "I'm with the SFK." Dr. Semhall looked relieved, having expected such an answer.
You guys always have weird times, odd cover stories. If it wasn't for the money...
What? You don't believe in the work you do? This is for the good of humanity. I was shaking and stuttering as my mind raced for words to play along.
Right. You want to see the progress on the Maya too. I assure you, these new incubators will be able to grow any unformed bodies. We just need them to be intact. That's not what we do here. The flood and freeze technique is the only way to get them to us like that.
And that would be getting done where exactly? I cleared my throat. Dr. Semhall laughed at me like I was kidding.
Let's go. I don't have all day for this. I know you are early, but I still have things to do.
Right. I nodded. I followed my chaperone to the research area. I was shown the assembled prototype of the new incubators. I stated that the money was well spent. "What goes in these?" I'd asked. Coughing, Dr. Semhall gave me a squeazical look and corrected my question.
You don't think we are testing it here? I knew you would want to see the nursery.
We were suited in clean suits and sprayed up after we went into the basement via an elevator passkey.
I have access to the first 3 phases of production.
3 of the 4? I wondered.
No, we do all 5 phases here. Although I have no idea what phase 5 looks like. Phase 4 is when we harvest them.
The doors then opened. I retched. The incubators had vaguely humanoid things breathing in them. Living bodies, taken unformed, revived, and grown. My mind beheld a vista of flesh horrors and the devil's science.
It is all legal. These were medical waste. Nobody wanted them. They were brought here, purchased from the street facilities.
The doctor then noticed my revulsion. I was leaning and gagging. Right, of course. I knew that. I wanted to unsee what I had seen. I wanted to forget the summit of man's darkest evils. I hadn't even seen anything yet. When I was away from the foulest nightmare, unimaginable, and out of the suit, I just wanted to leave.
Well, do we get that increase in funding you guys promised?
We will be purchasing the Maya too. The crop looked really good. I tried to remain calm. Revulsion, horror, and desperate fear of being caught by whatever's behind such inequity made my voice hollow and harsh. I wandered like a fog of nightmares from the lobby. A sharp-eyed deputant was admitted as I left. I heard them say to the receptionist without a search from the security guard, "Dr. Semhall is expecting me at 10. Outside, I found my car. My investigations were not complete. I had only just begun. I drove to the nearest street facility, sat and watched it. There was a medical waste disposal area around back. It was taken from the small facility to a larger one, where it was allegedly destroyed. I knew the medical waste bin would not contain the first phases of the harvest. There was a lot of money coming through the back door, selling the bodies. Flood and freeze. They were using liquid to assist in the extraction, and then they were keeping the remains on ice. It was all being paid for by the SFK. I'd followed the money all the way down to the ground. I was staring at the front doors, wondering if they would make any difference to anyone getting the procedure. Did it matter that the removed thing wasn't destroyed? Did it matter that if it was being kept alive and grown artificially, secretly, for some kind of unknown use? But it mattered to me. Despite the terrors I had faced, despite the horrors, despite my fears, I had to know the rest. I had to know the truth. What was the Syndicate doing with just living, unformed ones I had illegally attained? Why such lengths to keep it a secret? I shuddered at the possibilities. I guess that the syndicate already knew that I knew most of their secrets. The price on my head had certainly gone up. I realized I had to get rid of my vehicle. Lay low. Disappear. I abandoned my vehicle and paid cash for another car and didn't register it. I was satisfied that I was somewhat incognito, driving a refurbished ride with stolen plates. The police would stop me if they found me driving a stolen vehicle, but I had to take my chances. I watched my old vehicle and confirmed that someone was watching for me. Parked hitmen, waiting for my return in vain. New terrors gripped me. They would kill me if they found me. I had no idea what I was up against. The SFK syndicate seemed massively rich and powerful. Perhaps there was no escape. I lived in fear, homeless, hiding from my own shadow. There was only one thing left for me to find out. I had to know what was ultimately done with the harvested flesh. Part of me did not want to know. Wanted to forget the whole thing and flee the country. I knew I would never be safe. I had to come so far, and there was no going back. I watched my watchers. When they gave up the hunt, I followed them. They went to their employer and reported they had lost track of me. My hitman had missed. I followed the middleman to the SFK syndicate's offices. It was part of the larger building that housed mostly administrators for the various syndicate-funded companies. None of them knew what the others were doing. It looked all legitimate on paper and to the eye. I saw the connection. Medical insurers, food processing and distributors, legal departments for sponsored politicians, analytics and grocery advertisers, and street facility administrators. There was even an office that handed grants for their doctors. The deputy that I had seen before, a low-ranking syndicate corporate officer, he was there. After recognizing them, I had a solid lead. I was going to find out where it all went down. I followed them into the rich neighborhood, Sand Creek's HOA. I visited the neighborhood repeatedly and observed. I obtained information like where they had hid a spare key to the back entrance, and even a gate code. I brought dog treats and made friends with Samson and Gory. I learned the schedule of the chaperers and security guards. When the SFK syndicate gathered, I had access to spy on them. I broke in and witnessed the most horrifying part of my story. Many of America's richest, most affluentials were there. They met late at night and sat in the banquet hall. I watched, hiding, stalking. They chattered aimlessly, and then they were served by the low-ranking SFK. I could not contain the mind-shattering horror of truth. I was able to remain a spectator undiscovered. I screamed and fell, wanting to break open my own skull and remove what I had learned. I watched as they feasted. I was driven nearly mad as they chewed and swallowed, slurping greedily. They ate from platters with baked meat. There was no mistaking what they were eating. The SFK had kept the bodies intact and alive, and grew them until they were artificially birthed. Then they brought them to the kitchen. Little ones were slaughtered and butchered and prepared like succulent pigs. They stuffed an apple into the deformed human skulls and carved slices from them. They were all cannibals. When I did not think I could learn anything more horrible, I saw that they were not alone. They were merely cultists. Nothing but pawns of something far more ancient and horrible. My mind rejected their ghoulish patrons. I saw them there, and the darkness below. The cannibals were only sampling the greater feast, the meat of many. They only ate a small portion of much greater supply. The rest of the meat went down to those below. I could still not comprehend what they were. What I saw was indescribable. They were humanoid, horrible, thick, scaly, gal creatures. The gals were never human. They were our own owners, our butchers. And Americans, they're cattle. Nobody noticed me at first. I stared, anguished by dread and dreadful epiphany. Mankind was merely food for the devils below. They were before us, and they will be after us, the syndicate said in an unfiled greed. My screams were silent blast, whimpering mindlessly. I repeated things that meant nothing. My sanity was not with me. Somehow I walked out among the wealthy cannibals, looked into the darkness below where the spidey claws, glassy eyes stared back. Then I walked out of the charnel house, the way I'd entered. My escape went unchallenged. Only the feasters were there, and only the dogs guarded the gate grounds. Samson and Gory followed me to the gate, tails wagging. I heard gunshot as one of the syndicate tried to shoot me. They missed, and I wandered through the rich neighborhood. I found my car and drove away. Some time went before I was able to regain my composure. Days, weeks, months. I was homeless and half mad, knowing the details of my investigation, trying to remember who I was. I had to rebuild my life. Fleeing the country was my first step. It was a good idea, since they had given up on the shadow hunt and had a warrant for my arrest issued. I doubted that I would survive very long in jail. I waited and began to collect myself, sorting out my memories, and writing it all down as it came to me. There was no way I could resurface without becoming a target for them. There was no way to tell my story. If I didn't tell on them, didn't purport to what is true, then it was all suffered in vain. I would die anyway, one way or another. I had to do this. I had to come home and face the consequences. I lived my last days in hopes that somehow people would wake up and know what is happening to America. I hoped that the truth would be enough. For the time, after I concluded my investigation, I lived in a good health and well-being, realizing I had made a sacrifice in the name of truth. Whether or not there will be justice, that's up to you. This is my testimony, and I swear it to be true. Farewell.